The courtroom in Cedar Ridge, Colorado, smelled faintly of polished wood and stale coffee. Sunlight filtered through the tall, arched windows, casting long, sharp shadows across the polished floor. The sound of shuffling papers, murmured conversations, and the occasional cough created a quiet hum, one that would soon be shattered. At the center of the room, 3-year-old Ellie Monroe clutched her grandmother's hand like a lifeline. Her small frame seemed almost swallowed by the oversized courtroom chair, and yet her eyes, large, dark, and unblinking, commanded attention. She didn't fidget, didn't whimper, didn't look away. Instead, she stared at the front of the room with an intensity that made grown adults uneasy. Near the judge's bench sat Judge Whittaker, a woman whose calm demeanor and silver hair had earned her respect in Cedar Ridge for decades. She presided over the courtroom with a quiet authority, rarely rattled by the mundane drama of civil disputes or traffic violations. But today, the air felt different, electric, unpredictable. At the front of the courtroom, Coda, the department's most seasoned police dog, lay beside his handler, Officer Reyes. The German Shepherd's coat gleamed under the fluorescent lights, his ears twitching slightly with each passing murmur. He was trained to detect drugs, explosives, and even human emotions, but nothing in his years of service had prepared him for what would unfold in the next few minutes. The case was supposed to be straightforward, a custody hearing for Ellie Monroe, whose father had died in a workplace accident 6 months prior. The mother, distraught and exhausted, sought full custody, while the father's estranged family had pushed for supervised visitation. Nothing about the case should have attracted attention. And yet, everyone in the courtroom felt the same prickling sensation, a premonition that something extraordinary was about to happen. Ellie shifted slightly, her small hand tugging at her grandmother's skirt. Then she froze. Her gaze locked onto Coda, and for a moment, it was as if she saw through the dog's calm exterior. A flicker of recognition passed across her face. The judge called the hearing to order, her gavel tapping lightly against the bench. "We are here today to discuss the custody arrangement for Miss Ellie Monroe," she began, her voice steady but soft. "Let us proceed with decorum." Ellie didn't flinch at the words. She didn't shrink or hide behind her grandmother. Instead, she rose on tiptoe, her tiny fingers pointing directly at Coda. The courtroom went silent. Every adult froze mid-breath, unsure whether to intervene or let the child continue. Judge Whittaker blinked, leaning forward. "Ellie, honey, why are you pointing at the police dog?" The child's lips trembled as she swallowed. Her voice, though small, carried a clarity that made every ear in the room perk up. He was there when Daddy fell," Ellie said, her words almost like a whisper, yet somehow amplified by the room's tense silence. Officer Reyes stiffened. His hand twitched along Coda's leash. The memory of that night, long buried under reports, paperwork, and departmental procedures, flooded back. Coda had been at the scene, the first and only living witness to a tragedy that had been ruled an accident. The judge's pen paused mid-scribble. "What do you mean? He was there when Daddy fell." Her voice was gentle but firm, like a lifeline thrown to a child wading through stormy waters. Ellie's eyes widened, and for the first time, her voice carried an urgency that cut through the room like a knife. "He tried to tell me something." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. The spectators leaned forward, some craning their necks for a better look. Whispers spread like wildfire, a mix of disbelief and fear. Officer Reyes knelt beside Coda, his fingers brushing the dog's thick fur. "You remember, don't you, boy?" he murmured. Coda's ears flicked, and he let out a low, almost mournful whine. Judge Whittaker stood, her calm exterior beginning to crack. "Ellie, can you tell us what you remember?" The child stepped closer to the dog, her small feet making soft, almost inaudible taps on the wooden floor. Her eyes never left Coda's face, and the dog lifted his head, his gaze locking with hers in a way that made the hair on the back of Officer Reyes' neck stand up. "He barked at the man in the red jacket," Ellie said, her voice trembling with both fear and certainty. The courtroom froze. The mention of the red jacket hit like a thunderclap. Officer Ray's hand tightened on the leash. That detail had never been made public, never recorded in the official report. There had been footprints, evidence of struggle, unidentifiable jacket fibers, but no suspects had ever been named. Judge Whittaker's knuckles whitened around the gavel. "Ellie, where did you see this man?" The child's answer came like a small earthquake, shaking everyone to their core. "Daddy told me to hide, then Coda came." A cold silence followed, heavier than any the courtroom had ever known. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to pause. Every adult in the room felt it, the sudden realization that the seemingly random details of a toddler's memory could be the key to unlocking a long-forgotten mystery. Ellie's grandmother stepped forward, her face pale. "Your Honor, she remembers things she shouldn't, things we never told her." Judge Whittaker leaned forward, her eyes narrowing, not in suspicion but in awe. "Ellie, is there anything else you can tell us about the man in the red jacket?" The child's lips quivered. "He said he'd come back." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Every head turned toward the entrance of the courtroom, every breath caught in everyone's chest. Some whispered prayers, some cursed under their breath. Officer Ray's jaw tightened. He had spent years training Coda to detect danger, to anticipate threats, and yet nothing in his experience prepared him for this moment. The dog's ears twitched, his body rigid, and his low growl vibrated through the polished floorboards, a warning unspoken but undeniable. The judge tapped her gavel lightly, trying to regain control, but even she struggled against the tidal wave of tension that had suddenly overtaken the room. We will recess immediately," she said, her voice quivering just slightly. "Security will ensure the child's safety while we—" Ellie tugged at her grandmother's hand, her small voice breaking through the controlled chaos. "He's still here. He's coming back." And with that, the courtroom erupted into whispers, murmurs, and urgent questions. Phones were drawn, pens scribbled, and somewhere deep in the room, a sense of anticipation and fear coiled like a living thing, ready to strike. Coda lifted his head fully, his amber eyes locking with Ellie, as if confirming the truth of her words. His growl softened, a subtle shift in tone that suggested both understanding and readiness. The dog who had never been wrong was telling them all. This was only the beginning. Outside the courtroom, the sun dipped lower, casting long, twisting shadows over the courthouse steps. And somewhere nearby, a man in a red jacket moved silently, unnoticed, but very much present. The judge, the officers, the family, the spectators, none of them knew it yet. But Ellie had seen him. And that small, 3-year-old witness held the first thread of a story that would unravel everything they thought they knew about the accident. The tension was palpable. Every heartbeat in the room seemed synchronized, waiting, knowing that something monumental, terrifying, unbelievable, and utterly real was about to unfold. And in that instant, Judge Whittaker realized the courtroom was no longer just a place for law. It had become the stage for a story that even she could not have imagined. The courtroom had never been this quiet. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. All eyes were on Ellie Monroe, the tiny girl standing unflinchingly in the polished, echoing chamber, her small finger still pointing at Coda, the police dog. The tension was thick enough to slice through. Judge Whittaker leaned back in her chair, her pen suspended midair. Her calm, judicial demeanor wavered for the first time in decades. She'd presided over high-stakes trials, domestic disputes, and even violent crimes, but nothing had prepared her for the sudden, piercing certainty in a 3-year-old's eyes. "Ellie," the judge said slowly, forcing her voice to remain gentle, "why are you pointing at the dog?" Ellie's lips quivered. She bit her bottom lip and swallowed hard. He was there when Daddy fell," she said again, louder this time. Her voice trembled with the weight of something far beyond her age. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Murmurs rippled like waves across the room. Some leaned forward in disbelief, others exchanged uneasy glances. The grandmother, Margaret Monroe, clutched Ellie's shoulders, trying to calm her trembling granddaughter, but she, too, seemed frozen by what her child had just said. Officer Ray's hand went instinctively to Coda's collar. The dog's ears twitched, and a low, warning growl rumbled from deep in his chest. Ray's eyes darted toward the child, trying to reconcile what she was saying with the case file he had buried months ago. He had never shared this detail with anyone. Not even the judge, not even the family. The incident had been classified with only a skeletal report filed. Coda had barked, viciously, urgently, at someone near the wreckage of the collapsed loading dock. The report had called it unidentifiable disturbance, and the investigation had gone cold. Judge Whitaker's pen finally touched the desk. She spoke softly, trying to coax the child into elaboration. "Ellie, can you tell us what you saw?" Ellie's large, brown eyes flicked from the judge to Coda. "He barked at the man in the red jacket," she said, almost as if she expected everyone to understand immediately. The courtroom froze. The words were more than unsettling, they were explosive. No one had ever mentioned a red jacket. Officer Ray swallowed hard. He remembered it now. The red jacket was there, unmistakable, caught in the periphery of Coda's vision as he tried to protect Ellie's father from harm. The man had fled the scene. His identity remained unknown. And now this child, barely able to speak full sentences, was nomming him. Judge Whitaker blinked rapidly, trying to maintain composure. "Ellie, how do you know about a man in a red jacket?" The girl's small hand grasped Coda's paw, a gesture that seemed to steady her. "Because he was shouting at Daddy before he fell," she said, her voice gaining clarity. "Daddy told me to hide, then Coda came." The whisper of revelation swept through the courtroom like a gust of wind. Reporters scribbled furiously, deputies leaned forward, and Margaret Monroe's grip on Ellie tightened, almost as if shielding her from a sudden storm. Officer Ray's mind raced. He remembered the night with horrifying clarity, the thunder of the collapsing dock, the splintering metal, the scream of a man crushed beneath steel beams, and the bark, Coda's relentless, fierce barking at an unseen intruder. He had noted it in his report but had no evidence to identify the man. Now, Ellie had put words to what Coda had tried to communicate. Judge Whitaker's knuckles whitened around the gavel. She leaned forward, her voice trembling slightly despite her training. "Ellie, what else do you remember?" Ellie's lips quivered. Her tiny voice was almost inaudible now. "He said he'd come back." The courtroom froze again. Every adult felt it, a chill creeping down their spine. The words carried a threat, a warning, a memory that no one should have had access to, least of all a 3-year-old. Margaret Monroe whispered softly to the judge. "Your Honor, she remembers things she shouldn't, things we never told her." Judge Whitaker swallowed hard. She had faced liars, hardened criminals, and expert witnesses. She had never encountered a witness whose memory seemed almost preternatural. "Ellie," she said, leaning forward, her voice softening, "how do you know this?" Ellie's answer came in a whisper that carried a weight far beyond her years. "Coda tried to tell me. He tried to stop him." The courtroom erupted into murmurs. A few deputies exchanged glances, understanding the gravity of what was being said. Coda's low growl deepened, vibrating through the polished wood floor. His eyes remained locked on the child, full of patience, intelligence, and something almost human, an understanding of the danger lurking in the room. Officer Ray stepped forward, his voice measured but urgent. "Everyone please step back." His eyes never left Coda or Ellie. The dog's every muscle was tense, ready to spring. "Ellie," he said softly, "can you show me what happened?" The child's small hand pointed toward the courtroom door. "There, he was there," she said. Her eyes flicked to every adult in the room as if daring them to believe her. Coda barked. Daddy fell. He ran. A wave of unease swept over the judge. She had seen enough courtroom dramas to know that fear could be contagious, but this was different. The fear was real. The danger, though unseen, felt present. Judge Whittaker stood abruptly, silencing the whispers. "We will recess immediately," she said, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "Security, please escort the child and her grandmother to a safe area. And Officer Reyes, I want a review of the original incident report, every detail. Now." The deputies moved quickly, guiding Ellie and her grandmother from the courtroom. Ellie's eyes never left Coda. The dog's ears twitched as if sensing the weight of what she was carrying, a memory so powerful it could shatter lives. Once the child and Margaret were safely in a secure room, Judge Whittaker leaned over to Officer Reyes. "Tell me everything you know about that night," she said quietly. Her pen hovered over the desk, but she didn't write. She couldn't. Every detail he provided demanded full attention. Reyes took a deep breath, his voice low and deliberate. Coda was at the construction site when the collapse happened. He barked at someone near the edge of the dock. The official report calls it unidentifiable, a potential witness. But there was no evidence, no footage. It was ignored. Judge Whittaker's eyes narrowed. Ignored. Reyes nodded grimly. "We didn't know who the man was. No leads. No fingerprints. Only footprints and the jacket fibers. And now Ellie remembers. She's too young to have learned this anywhere but from Coda." The judge swallowed. The enormity of the revelation pressed down on her chest. A toddler had just reopened a case that had long been considered closed, and she had done it by pointing at a dog. In the secure room, Ellie sat on a small chair, Coda resting his massive head on the floor beside her. She hugged her knees, whispering, "He'll come back." Margaret tried to comfort her. "SHH, honey, he can't hurt us here." Ellie shook her head. "He's real, I saw him." Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, a shadow moved silently along the sunlit steps. A man in a red jacket paused, glancing toward the courtroom windows. He did not enter but remained hidden, watching. His intentions were unknown. The threat was real. Back in the courtroom, Judge Whittaker made a decision. The case would be reopened. Investigators would return. And Coda, the dog who had seen what humans could not, would become the key to uncovering the truth. But no one yet knew that the man in the red jacket had already arrived. Ellie's small voice, almost a whisper, carried across the secure room. "Coda, he knows." And for the first time, everyone realized the dog had been trying to speak all along. The tension was palpable. Every adult knew one thing. The past had just come alive, and the courtroom was no longer a place of law. It was the center of a storm that was about to explode. The secure room where Ellie and her grandmother had been led was small, suffused with the soft hum of an air conditioner and the faint smell of antiseptic. Sunlight streamed through the blinds in uneven stripes, casting jagged shadows on the linoleum floor. Coda lay beside Ellie, his head resting near her tiny feet, but his ears twitched constantly, tracking every sound outside the door. He was alert, always alert, but something deeper had stirred within him, something that spoke to memory, recognition, and a mission unspoken. Margaret Monroe sat on a vinyl chair, her hands clutching the hem of her blouse. Her chest heaved as she tried to steady herself. "Ellie," she whispered gently, "tell me again what you saw." The child's small lips trembled. She fiddled with the edge of Coda's leash, tracing invisible patterns on the floor. Then, without looking up, she began to speak, her voice shaky but precise. "Daddy, he fell. I saw a man, he was wearing a red jacket. He yelled at Daddy and then he pushed." Margaret's grip tightened on Ellie's shoulders. "Oh, baby, you don't understand, that's—" Ellie interrupted, her wide eyes locking on Coda's face. Coda tried to stop him. He barked, he ran, he tried to tell me. "I hid under the stairs like Daddy said. Then, her voice cracked. Then Daddy fell." Margaret felt a chill creep down her spine. She tried to shield her granddaughter from the horror of that night, but now the child's words carried a clarity that no adult could ignore. Officer Reyes, summoned by Judge Whitaker, knelt on the opposite side of the room, his eyes never leaving the child. "Ellie," he said gently, "can you show me what happened?" The child hesitated, then nodded. She crawled toward the corner of the room, her tiny hands mapping invisible walls, stairs, and shadows. "Here," she whispered, "Daddy was there. Coda was here. The man, he came from this way." Ray's heart pounded as he traced the imaginary path with his finger. The child's memory, so vivid and unfiltered, lined up with fragments he remembered from the incident report: the collapsed loading dock, the scattered debris, the unidentifiable footprints. Ellie had reconstructed the scene with a precision that was terrifying and awe-inspiring. Judge Whitaker, observing through a video feed from her chambers, sat in stunned silence. She had dealt with expert witnesses, forensic specialists, and decades of trial experience, but no adult or expert could rival the insight of a 3-year-old, recalling a traumatic event through instinct and intuition. Margaret swallowed hard. "Ellie, honey, how do you know all this?" Ellie's answer came softly, almost as a statement of fact. "Coda, he tried to tell me." The room seemed to vibrate with tension. Officer Ray's hand instinctively brushed Coda's fur, and the dog responded with a deep, low whine. It was the sound of acknowledgement, of warning, of understanding. Coda had been there that night, and now, through the child, he had found a voice. Outside the room, detectives and forensic officers reviewed old files. The original accident report had listed minimal details: a collapsed dock, an estimated time of death, a few statements from witnesses who had not seen the entire event. But buried in the report were notes that had always seemed inconsequential: footprints leading away from the edge, a glimpse of red fabric, a shredded glove. Nobody had followed up. Nobody had thought it significant, until now. Judge Whitaker, still monitoring the room via video feed, called Officer Reyes. "I want every shred of evidence, photographs, reports, witness statements. We're reopening this case. Fully. And I want a complete inventory of all items recovered from the site, including those previously deemed irrelevant." Ray's jaw tightened. He had spent years in law enforcement, but he had never seen the system respond this quickly to a child's testimony. "Understood, Your Honor," he said, his voice low but steady. Back in the secure room, Ellie continued to describe the scene. "He had something shiny. He picked it up after Daddy fell. I think he wanted to take it." Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Ellie, what did he take?" The child shook her head. "I don't know, but Coda, he tried to stop him. I saw him run." The dog's low growl deepened, resonating through the linoleum floor. It was almost as if Coda was confirming the truth of Ellie's words. The man in the red jacket had been there. He had interfered. And now, after months of silence, the past was beginning to unravel. Detectives and officers swarmed the courthouse, reviewing every photograph and report from the original accident. They compared footprints, glove fibers, and jacket remnants with local records. Every detail that had once seemed trivial now carried weight, and the man in the red jacket was no longer a shadowy figure. They had enough evidence to start identifying him. Meanwhile, Ellie sat quietly, her small hands resting on Coda's massive paw. She looked up at him with a mix of awe and gratitude. "He's smart," she whispered. "He knows things." Ray's knelt beside them. "Yes, he does, Ellie. He remembers everything, and now he's helping us find the truth." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I just can't believe she remembers all this," she said. "She's just a baby." Ray's nodded. "Sometimes the smallest witnesses are the most important, and sometimes animals see things we cannot." Ellie's eyes widened. "But he'll come back," she said softly. "The man in the red jacket, he promised." The words sent a shiver through everyone in the room. Detective Sergeant Harlan, reviewing the old evidence, paused. "If she's right," he muttered, "we're dealing with someone dangerous. Someone who's willing to lie, cover up, and potentially come back for more." Judge Whittaker, observing via the video feed, whispered to herself, "We need to move fast. Every second counts." Outside the courthouse, a man in a red jacket lingered near the steps. He watched the building, silent and still. The courthouse doors swung open occasionally as staff entered and exited, but he did not approach. His intentions were unclear, but the tension in the air hinted at a storm about to break. Back in the secure room, Ellie continued her quiet narration, pointing out invisible landmarks in her small hands. The stairs, the edge of the dock, the shadowy figure of the man. He had a shiny thing," she said again. Coda barked. He ran. Daddy fell. Officer Reyes exchanged a glance with Margaret. "This child, she is our key," he said softly. "Coda can't speak, but she can. She remembers what we cannot." Coda shifted slightly, resting his head closer to Ellie, almost as if to comfort her. But his body remained taut, his ears pricked. Danger lingered just beyond the walls of the courthouse, and the dog sensed it. Judge Whittaker's voice came over the intercom. "Officer Reyes, begin coordination with all local law enforcement. Reopen the investigation. Cross-reference every file related to the construction site accident. And prepare for a possible confrontation with the individual in the red jacket." Reyes nodded grimly. He had a gut feeling that this would not be an ordinary investigation. The combination of a small child's memory and a dog's instincts made the case volatile, unpredictable, and potentially explosive. Ellie leaned against Coda, her tiny voice almost a whisper. "He tried to hurt Daddy, but Coda, he tried to stop him. You have to find him." Rey's hand rested on Coda's head. "We will, Ellie. I promise you we will." Margaret hugged her granddaughter tightly, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. The past, once buried under rubble and official reports, was resurfacing, and the child, guided by a dog's memory, was leading them straight into the heart of the mystery. Outside, the man in the red jacket moved slightly, blending into the shadows, unaware that the investigation had already begun. The wheels of justice, set into motion by the smallest and most unexpected of witnesses, were turning. Inside, Ellie whispered to Coda again, "He's coming back, but we're ready, right?" Coda's amber eyes met hers, unwavering and intelligent. A deep growl rumbled from his chest, not a threat but a promise. They were ready. And in that small, secure room, the truth waited, poised to emerge from memory, instinct, and courage. An unraveling story that no one could have predicted, and one that would change lives forever. By the time the courtroom reconvened, the air had become almost unbearable with anticipation. Word of Ellie's testimony had spread through Cedar Ridge like wildfire. Every bench was filled with family members, reporters, and law enforcement personnel who had been summoned last minute. The gallery buzzed with whispered speculation, but when Ellie and her grandmother entered, the chatter ceased. All eyes turned toward the child who, at 3 years old, had upended a case long thought closed. Ellie walked slowly, her hand in Margaret's, her tiny frame casting a fragile shadow on the polished floor. But despite her size, there was an unmistakable gravity to her presence. She climbed onto the small witness chair without hesitation. Judge Whittaker adjusted her glasses and leaned forward, her voice calm but commanding. "Ellie, please tell us again what happened the night your father fell." Ellie's lips trembled. She looked toward Coda, who was now seated alertly beside Officer Reyes. The dog's head tilted slightly, as if nodding in encouragement. The courtroom held its collective breath. He had a red jacket," Ellie said, her voice quivering but growing stronger. "He yelled at Daddy. He told him to move, and then he pushed him." A gasp echoed across the courtroom. Journalists' pens flew across notebooks, and some reporters instinctively leaned forward, their recorders pointed toward the child. A few deputies exchanged tense glances. They had all seen Coda in action, knew the dog's instincts were reliable. But now, a toddler's words were connecting the dots that no evidence had ever clarified. Judge Whittaker's knuckles whitened on the gavel. "Ellie, Do you know this man? Ellie shook her head. No, I just saw him, but Coda he knew. He barked. He tried to stop him. Officer Reyes swallowed hard. He remembered that night with perfect clarity, the collapsing dock, the frantic cries, the shadows in the debris. Coda had barked relentlessly at someone approaching, a figure only briefly glimpsed, the man in a red jacket. The report had called it an unidentifiable presence, a detail too small to investigate further at the time. But now, with Ellie pointing him out, the man had a name in their minds. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Judge Whittaker leaned forward, her voice softer this time. Ellie, did you see anything else? Ellie's voice dropped to a whisper. He had something shiny. He picked it up after Daddy fell. I think he wanted to take it. The words sent a shiver down the spine of everyone in the room. Margaret's hands flew to her mouth as though to stifle a cry. Ellie, she murmured, her eyes wide with disbelief. Officer Reyes moved closer to Coda, whispering, Stay calm, boy, stay calm. Coda's ears twitched, his body taut with alertness. The dog had been at the scene, and now he was confirming Ellie's account with every instinct he had. Judge Whittaker pressed on, trying to maintain control of the courtroom. Ellie, did the man leave? Ellie nodded, her small fingers clenched into tiny fists. Yes, Coda chased him, but he ran fast. I hid under the stairs like Daddy said. Then Daddy fell. Her voice broke. The gallery erupted in a mixture of murmurs, gasps, and shocked whispers. This was no ordinary custody hearing anymore. What had begun as a routine legal matter had transformed into the reopening of a potentially criminal case, one that had remained unsolved for months. Detective Sergeant Harlan, who had been reviewing the original incident files, leaned toward Officer Reyes. If this kid is telling the truth, we've been looking at the wrong angle all along, he murmured. We need to cross-reference everything from that night. Footprints, jacket fibers, the whole works. The judge's voice cut through the murmurs. Security, please ensure the child and her family remain protected. And Officer Reyes, I want the original incident report pulled immediately. Every scrap of evidence. We're going to reopen this case today. As the courtroom descended into a controlled frenzy of activity, Ellie remained focused on Coda. She whispered, He's coming back. The words, soft yet chilling, hung in the air. It was more than a statement, it was a warning. Margaret hugged her granddaughter tightly. No one can hurt us, honey, she whispered, though her own voice trembled with fear. But outside, in the sun-dappled courthouse plaza, a man wearing a red jacket paused. He lingered near the edge of the steps, watching the courthouse doors, unmoving. His intentions were unknown, but the tension in the air was palpable. The threads of past and present were converging, and every second that passed brought the possibility of confrontation closer. Inside, the courtroom slowly began to piece together the significance of Ellie's testimony. Journalists scribbled feverishly, deputies whispered urgent reports to their superiors, and Judge Whittaker maintained a careful, commanding presence. The tiny child had done what no investigation had been able to do, put a face, a presence, and a motivation to an incident that had been considered an accident. Ellie continued, pointing subtly toward Coda. He barked here at this spot. Then he ran. I saw him pick something shiny. I think he wanted to take it. The judge's brow furrowed. Officer Reyes, have you reviewed the evidence regarding any items missing from the site? Reyes' jaw tightened. Yes, Your Honor. There were a few minor tools, a key card, and some personal items unaccounted for. None of it seemed significant at the time, but now I see they may have been taken by this man. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. Every adult present could feel the weight of the child's words, the dog's silent confirmation, and the possible presence of the red-jacketed man nearby. They were on the edge of something dangerous, something that had been dormant for months, but was now erupting into the present. Ellie's whisper broke through the tension again. Coda, he tried to tell us. He knows. Reyes nodded. Yes, he does, Ellie, and he's helping us now. The courtroom buzzed as officers began reviewing video footage, cross-referencing reports, and preparing for immediate action. Judge Whitaker knew that what Ellie had revealed was more than just a memory. It was the key to solving a case that had been cold for months. Outside, the man in the red jacket shifted slightly, his eyes scanning the courthouse. He did not move closer, but the implication was clear. He knew something, and he was aware that his past actions were about to catch up with him. Back in the courtroom, Ellie leaned against Coda, her small hands resting on his massive paw. "He's coming back," she said again, her voice a whisper of both fear and certainty. Officer Reyes' hand rested on Coda's head. "We will be ready, Ellie," he said quietly. "Coda and I will stop him." The judge's voice, calm yet filled with determination, cut through the room. "This hearing is adjourned temporarily. The case is reopened. We will proceed with a full investigation, starting immediately." As the courtroom slowly emptied, the tension did not dissipate. Ellie remained beside Coda, her trust in the dog absolute, her fear tempered by the knowledge that the animal had seen what no human had. Outside, the man in the red jacket lingered, a silent threat. The pieces of the puzzle were moving, converging, and the storm that had been building for months was about to break. Inside, Coda lifted his head, ears twitching, alert to every sound. His amber eyes scanned the room, aware of danger yet poised for action. Ellie whispered again, almost as if to reassure herself, "He's coming back, but we're ready." And in that moment, every adult in the room understood that the past was no longer buried. It had returned, fueled by memory, instinct, and a small child's unwavering courage. The red-jacketed man had been seen. He had been identified. And now, the stage was set for a confrontation that none of them could have predicted, one that would test courage, truth, and the bond between a child and a dog in ways that no courtroom had ever witnessed before. The moment Judge Whitaker declared the case officially reopened, the courthouse descended into controlled chaos. Phones rang incessantly, printers hummed, and officers scurried through hallways carrying folders that had been gathering dust for months. Every piece of overlooked evidence, from scraps of clothing to fingerprints and photographs, was being pulled, cataloged, and examined. At the center of it all stood Officer Reyes, Coda by his side, scanning the files. The dog's ears flicked toward every sound, the shuffle of papers, the soft tap of footsteps, the distant echo of someone entering the building. Coda had been at the construction site the night Ellie's father had fallen. He had barked, he had tried to intervene, he had witnessed what no human had. But now, months later, the dog's instincts were guiding a new investigation. Reyes flipped through the original incident report. His fingers traced the faded ink of notes he had written in haste the night of the accident. Footprints, fibers, a red jacket, a glove shredded and discarded. Everything had been considered insignificant at the time. Now, under Judge Whitaker's orders, it was invaluable. "We're going to start with the footprints," Reyes said, more to himself than anyone else. He lifted a photograph from the folder, a partial impression near the edge of the collapsed dock. The pattern was faint, almost indistinguishable, but with Coda's memory and Ellie's description, Reyes felt a renewed sense of purpose. Detective Sergeant Harlan approached, his eyes sharp. "We'll need to cross-reference all construction site personnel, visitors, and anyone with access that day. That red jacket, any witness, anyone who saw someone wearing it, that's our lead." Reyes nodded, agreed, and we'll track every piece of evidence that was dismissed before. Tools, keycards, personal items. If Ellie saw him pick up something shiny, then something was taken. That's our first tangible clue. Meanwhile, Margaret Monroe tried to calm her granddaughter. Ellie sat on a small bench, Coda's massive head resting on her lap. "He's coming back," she whispered, her small fingers stroking the dog's fur. "I know it." Margaret's chest tightened. "Sweetheart, we're safe here. No one can hurt you." Ellie's eyes, wide and solemn, flicked toward the doorway. "But he knows, Coda knows, we have to stop him." Outside the courthouse, A man in a red jacket lingered. He blended into the shadows, but his presence was unmistakable to anyone paying close attention. Security cameras had already picked him up on the plaza, standing silently, watching the building. He had come for one reason: to ensure the past remained buried. But the reopening of the case, spurred by a 3-year-old's memory and a police dog's instincts, had thrown him off balance. Back inside, Judge Whitaker leaned over her desk, speaking quietly into her phone. "I want every available detective on this. Pull surveillance footage from the surrounding area, coordinate with local law enforcement, and start canvassing witnesses who may have seen someone matching this description." Reyes rose, his jaw tight. "We'll need to interview everyone who was on site that day. Contractors, delivery personnel, even trespassers. That red jacket was distinctive. Someone saw it." Harlan nodded. "And we need to keep Ellie and her grandmother protected. If the man finds out she's the reason the investigation is back on, he may act." In the secure room, Ellie remained close to Coda. The dog's amber eyes scanned the room constantly, alert to even the slightest sound. He had been at the scene. He had tried to protect Ellie's father. Now, months later, he seemed to sense the man's presence lurking just beyond the courthouse walls. "Do you remember everything, Ellie?" Margaret asked softly. Ellie nodded. "Coda remembers too. He'll help us find him." Reyes crouched beside them. "We will, Ellie. We'll find him. But we need your help too. Can you tell me everything you remember about what he did?" The child's eyes lit up with a mix of fear and determination. "He yelled at Daddy. He grabbed something shiny. Coda barked, he ran, and Daddy fell. I hid under the stairs." Reyes' heart pounded. This simple 3-year-old recounting of events was far more precise than any adult witness could have been. And the dog's behavior, its growls, its focused attention, lent credibility to every word. Margaret looked at her granddaughter, her own fear mingling with awe. "I never thought she'd remember like this. It's incredible." Reyes nodded. "Sometimes the smallest witnesses are the most important. Sometimes animals see things we can't." The tension in the courthouse escalated as investigators began following leads. Surveillance footage from nearby buildings was reviewed frame by frame. License plate records were cross-checked. The red-jacketed man had been spotted leaving the area, but no one knew his destination. Every step of the investigation felt like chasing a shadow. And then a breakthrough. A security guard from a nearby office building remembered seeing a man in a red jacket running across the plaza on the day of the accident. He had been carrying a small, shiny object. It was consistent with what Ellie had described, a keycard or tool that could have belonged to the construction site. Officer Reyes' hands tightened on Coda's leash. "We have him," he murmured. "We know where he went." Judge Whitaker's voice came through the intercom. "Move quickly. Discretion is critical. We cannot alert him that we are closing in." Outside, the man in the red jacket was still lurking, unaware that the investigation had already identified him. Every move he made was being tracked, and every action brought him closer to the inevitable confrontation. Inside, Ellie whispered again to Coda, her small hand resting on the dog's massive paw. "He's coming back. We have to stop him." Coda's low growl vibrated through the floor, a warning and a promise. The dog had been a witness. The child had been a witness. And together, they were guiding law enforcement toward a truth that had been buried for too long. Reyes and the detectives coordinated their next steps, preparing for surveillance, potential pursuit, and capture. Every detail mattered: the footprints, the fibers, the keycard, and the unmistakable red jacket. Margaret clutched Ellie tightly, whispering, "It's going to be okay, baby. You're safe with Coda and Officer Reyes." Ellie looked at the dog, her eyes steady. "I know, but we have to stop him." The tension in the courthouse was palpable. The reopening of the case, spurred by the unlikely duo of a toddler and a police dog, had set in motion a chain of events that none of them could predict. The past was no longer buried, and the man in the red jacket had no idea that his secrets were about to catch up with him. Outside, the wind shifted slightly, carrying the sound of footsteps along the plaza. The red-jacketed man moved again, still unaware that every move he made was being tracked and that the storm was closing in. Inside, Kota rose to his feet, tail low but tense, ears pricked. His gaze followed every sound, every shadow, every movement. He had been a witness. He had been a protector. And now, months later, he was about to play a pivotal role in bringing the truth to light. Ellie whispered once more, her small voice resolute. "We're ready, Kota, we're ready." And in that moment, every adult in the room realized the case had truly begun again. The past was no longer dormant. The investigation was live, and the confrontation with the red-jacketed man, inevitable, dangerous, and long overdue, was closer than anyone could have imagined. The stage was set for a showdown that would test courage, instincts, and the bond between a child and a dog, one that had already proven more powerful than any human investigation. The storm had begun. The courthouse lobby was unusually quiet, almost eerily so. A few clerks moved about, filing papers, the soft clatter of keyboards and the murmur of conversation echoing across the polished marble floors. But beneath that mundane routine, a storm was gathering, one that had been set in motion by a tiny girl and a police dog with memory sharper than any human witness. Near the side entrance, a man lingered. He wore a red jacket, its color muted under the bright morning sun but unmistakable. He didn't approach the metal detector. He didn't register on anyone's immediate radar. He simply stood there, shifting slightly from foot to foot, his eyes scanning the doors leading to the courtroom. To an untrained eye, he was just another passerby, someone waiting for a meeting or a delivery. But Officer Reyes didn't miss it. Kota's ears twitched, his head lifting, eyes locking on the figure. A low growl rumbled from deep in the dog's chest, subtle at first, almost imperceptible. Reyes froze mid-step, heart hammering. This was no ordinary visitor. The man had been identified months ago as the unknown presence at the construction site, the one Ellie had described. And now, months later, he was here, within sight of the child and the courthouse. Reyes raised a hand to signal the other officers. They approached quietly, spreading out to cut off potential exits. "Stay calm," Reyes whispered to Kota, who stiffened beside him, tail low and body tense. Upstairs, Ellie sat with Margaret in the secure room, coloring quietly while her small hands occasionally brushed Kota's fur. But her attention was elsewhere. Her eyes darted toward the small window that gave a view of the courthouse entrance. She whispered, almost to herself, "He's here. He's watching." Margaret's eyes widened. "Ellie, sweetheart, don't be scared, you're safe." Ellie's gaze didn't waver. Kota knows, he knows what to do. Reyes pressed his hand to his walkie-talkie. "All units, suspect in red jackets spotted outside courthouse lobby. Do not approach without backup. Kota is on site. Maintain distance and observe. Confirm identity before engagement." The officers moved like shadows, silent, coordinated, each aware that any sudden movement could trigger a confrontation. The man in the red jacket remained still, but Reyes could feel it. He was tense, aware, and possibly armed, not necessarily with a weapon, but with something equally dangerous: desperation. Then suddenly, a clerk passed by the man and he shifted slightly, as if to follow her. Kota's growl deepened, a warning low and steady. He had been at the scene the night Ellie's father fell, and he remembered. Instinctively, he recognized the threat before anyone else could. Ellie's small voice whispered from upstairs, "He's moving, he's coming closer." Margaret's hands shook. "Ellie," she began, but the child had already turned her gaze fully to Kota. "Kota will stop him," she said firmly. Reyes nodded to one of the deputies. "Seal the stairwells and exits. We don't let him leave." The man in the red jacket paused, sensing he was being observed. He glanced quickly toward the secure room upstairs, though he couldn't see inside. His eyes flicked to the hallway leading to the courtroom, and for the first time he seemed uncertain. He had thought the past buried, invisible, but now the court, the child, and the dog had drawn him back into the light. Suddenly, he bolted. His long legs carried him across the marble floors toward the stairwell that led down to the parking garage. Officer Reyes shouted, and deputies moved to intercept, but Coda was already in motion. The dog surged forward with a precision that only instinct and training could achieve, his powerful muscles propelling him across the floor. The red-jacketed man scrambled down the stairs, clutching a small, metallic object in his hand, the same shiny thing Ellie had described. Panic surged in him as he realized he had been spotted, and now the law, guided by a 3-year-old and a dog, was closing in. Coda bounded down the stairwell, his paws pounding against the concrete steps. Officer Reyes followed, breathless but determined. Every second mattered. The man was dangerous, desperate, and now cornered by a force he hadn't anticipated. The relentless determination of a dog who remembered, and a child whose memory had reopened a case thought long dead. At the bottom of the stairwell, the man slipped on a wet patch near a trash bin. The metallic object skittered across the floor, clanging against the concrete. Coda stopped briefly, sniffing the air, then lunged forward again, his growl deep and menacing. The man scrambled to retrieve the object, desperation in his eyes. Reyes reached the bottom, hand on his firearm but voice calm and commanding. "Stop, you're under arrest." The man froze, the red jacket damp with sweat, the metallic object clutched tightly. He looked around frantically. "You don't understand," he shouted, voice breaking. "I didn't mean I didn't." Coda's growl intensified, his stance low, powerful, ready to spring. The dog's eyes were locked on the man, unwavering. The man's panic grew. He could sense the end of his escape. Upstairs, Ellie pressed her small hands against the window of the secure room, eyes wide. "Coda, get him," she whispered, almost cheering him on. Her small voice carried more conviction than any officer's commands. Margaret held her tightly, whispering, "Stay calm, Ellie. Let them handle it." But even she couldn't help but watch, heart pounding. The man in the red jacket made a final, desperate move. He bent down to grab the metallic object from the floor, then bolted toward a maintenance door leading outside. But Coda was faster. With a single, fluid motion, the dog intercepted him, pinning the man with precision. He barked fiercely, a sound that echoed up the stairwell and into the lobby. Officer Reyes lunged forward, handcuffs ready. "It's over, stay down." The man fell to his knees, defeated, the metallic object slipping from his grasp. Coda's growl softened slightly, though he remained vigilant, eyes never leaving the man. Reyes secured the handcuffs, checking for weapons and other items. The metallic object, a keycard with traces of blood and debris, was removed for evidence. This was the proof that tied the man directly to the construction site incident. Upstairs, Ellie's eyes filled with tears of relief. She looked down at Coda, stroking his fur. "You did it," she whispered. "You remembered, you stopped him." Margaret hugged her tightly, her own relief overwhelming. "You're safe now, baby. He can't hurt you." Coda sat back, tail slowly wagging, but his gaze remained sharp. He had done his job. He had remembered, and he had helped bring the truth to light. Officer Reyes spoke quietly to Judge Whitaker over the phone. "Suspect in custody. Metallic object recovered. Evidence matches description provided by child witness. Case ready for prosecution." The judge's voice was calm but carried a note of awe. "Excellent work, Officer Reyes, and give my regards to the real hero of this case." Reyes glanced at Coda, who tilted his head almost knowingly. "Yes, Your Honor, the hero is right here." In that moment, the courthouse, once ordinary and mundane, had become the stage for a story that would be remembered for years. A tiny child, a loyal police dog, and the reopening of a cold case had converged into a dramatic confrontation that proved courage and memory could come from the most unexpected sources. Outside, the red-jacketed man was led away in handcuffs, eyes wide with disbelief, the metallic object held as evidence of his guilt. The storm had broken, and the truth had prevailed. Upstairs, Ellie whispered once more, stroking Coda's fur. "We did it, Coda. We stopped him. Daddy's safe now." Coda rested his head in her lap, eyes calm but alert, ready for whatever came next. He had fulfilled his mission. And for the first time, the child and the dog shared a quiet moment of victory, one born from memory, instinct, and courage that transcended age and species. The courthouse was unusually tense the next morning. Word had spread quickly. The man in the red jacket had been caught, the metallic object recovered, and Coda, the police dog, was now regarded as a hero. Every seat in the courtroom was filled. Reporters jostled for space, deputies stood at attention, and Margaret Monroe held Ellie close, her heart hammering in her chest. Judge Whittaker entered the room, her silver hair pulled back tightly, her calm, commanding presence filling the chamber. "Court is in session," she announced. The gavel struck with a heavy echo that seemed to punctuate the gravity of the morning. At the front of the courtroom, the man in the red jacket sat in handcuffs, his head lowered. Officer Reyes and Detective Sergeant Harlan stood nearby, prepared to monitor every move. The metallic object, an item central to the investigation, rested on a table, evidence of the night that had haunted Cedar Ridge for months. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone knew that what would happen next could unravel the final truth behind the construction site accident, and finally explain the mystery that had puzzled investigators for so long. Judge Whittaker spoke, her voice firm yet measured. "Sir, you have been charged with actions that led to the death of a man at the construction site and interference with evidence. Do you understand these charges?" The man in the red jacket looked up slowly, his eyes meeting the judge's for the first time. His face was pale, strained, and his hands trembled in the handcuffs. "Yes," he muttered. The courtroom remained silent, waiting. Then Judge Whittaker gestured toward the prosecution. "Proceed." The lead prosecutor, a tall woman with sharp eyes, rose. "Your Honor, this case has been dormant for months, unsolved. But thanks to the unique testimony of a child and the actions of a police dog, the truth has come to light. We now know that the accused was present at the scene the night of the collapse and had direct involvement in actions that led to the death of Mr. Monroe." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously, some raising microphones to catch every word. Margaret Monroe's grip on Ellie's hand tightened. The judge looked down at Ellie, who sat quietly with Coda at her feet. "Ellie," she said gently, "would you like to tell us what you remember?" Ellie's voice, small but clear, cut through the courtroom. "He yelled at Daddy and then he pushed him. He grabbed something shiny and ran. Coda tried to stop him, but Daddy fell." A hush fell over the room. The weight of her words, combined with Coda's steady presence at her side, sent a wave of realization through everyone. The story, once buried in a cold file, was now unfolding in real time. Detective Harlan stepped forward. "Your Honor, we have evidence corroborating the child's testimony, footprints, fibers from the red jacket, and the metallic object recovered from the suspect. These items link him directly to the scene. His own attempt to flee the courthouse yesterday confirms his consciousness of guilt." The man in the red jacket shifted uncomfortably. His eyes darted to Coda, who watched him calmly, unwavering, intelligent. The dog's presence seemed to anchor the child's words in reality, proof that someone had witnessed everything. Margaret whispered to Ellie, "You're very brave, honey. You helped us find the truth." Ellie smiled faintly, brushing her hands along Coda's fur. "He remembers, too," she said softly. Judge Whittaker leaned forward, her voice firm. "Sir, you may now speak if you wish. This is your opportunity to tell the truth about that night." The man hesitated. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He looked around the courtroom, at the reporters, at the family, at Coda, and finally at the child whose memory had unraveled his carefully concealed actions. His voice, low and trembling, broke the silence. I didn't mean for it to happen," he began. "It was an accident, but I panicked. I didn't want to be caught. I grabbed the tool, the keycard. I wanted to cover my tracks. I didn't know anyone saw me. I didn't know the dog remembered or the girl." The courtroom seemed to shrink, every breath held as his confession unfolded. Officers exchanged tense glances. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth, fighting back tears. Ellie's eyes never left the man. She didn't speak, but her quiet gaze seemed to demand more truth. I yelled at him," he continued, voice shaking. "I didn't mean to push him. He was on the edge and I panicked. And then he fell. I froze. I didn't know what to do. I left." Judge Whitaker's gavel tapped lightly, punctuating each confession. "Sir, your words will be part of the official record. But understand, the court must now determine the extent of your liability and the consequences of your actions." Reyes stepped forward. "Your Honor, the child witness provided the first direct identification of the suspect's presence. Coda's behavior corroborates the sequence of events. The combination of a child's memory and a dog's instincts has revealed a previously unsolved tragedy." A reporter whispered to a colleague, barely audible. "A toddler and a dog solved a case no one else could." Ellie's small voice rang out again, almost to reinforce the truth. "He came back like he said, but we stopped him." The man in the red jacket lowered his head, tears streaming down his face. I know, I was wrong. I never thought anyone would figure it out. Not a child, not a dog, nobody." The courtroom was silent, but every person in it felt the weight of the confession. The truth, buried under months of investigation, fear, and accident reports, had finally emerged. The child, the dog, and the evidence had woven together a tapestry of reality that no adult witness could have unraveled alone. Judge Whitaker's voice broke the silence. "This court acknowledges the bravery of Miss Ellie Monroe and the exceptional instincts of Coda. Their actions have brought clarity and justice to a case long dormant. The next steps will involve sentencing and the full judicial process, but the truth has been revealed." Margaret held Ellie tightly, whispering softly, "You were so brave, honey. You helped us get justice for Daddy." Ellie leaned her head against Coda, resting it on his thick fur. "He remembered too," she said. "That's why we knew." The man in the red jacket was escorted from the courtroom under heavy guard. His face was pale, hollowed by guilt and fear, but the evidence, and the child's testimony, ensured that he could not escape justice. Outside the courthouse, reporters filed stories of the improbable chain of events: a 3-year-old child, a police dog, and a decades-old accident solved with courage, memory, and instinct. Social media exploded with clips of Ellie pointing at Coda and the courtroom reactions, captivating an audience that couldn't believe the extraordinary sequence of events. Back inside, Coda rested, his job complete, for now. He had been the bridge between a traumatic memory and the uncovering of truth. The child's trust in him had guided the investigation, and the courtroom had witnessed a new kind of heroism. Judge Whitaker made a final note in her record. "Today, the court has seen the power of courage and instinct in the unlikeliest of forms. A child and a dog have proven that truth can emerge in ways no one expects." Ellie's small hand stroked Coda's fur one last time. "We did it," she whispered. Reyes knelt beside her. "Yes, Ellie, you and Coda, you did it together. Justice is done because of both of you." The courtroom slowly emptied, but the story of that day, of a child who remembered and a dog who had witnessed, would linger forever. The truth had been revealed, the guilty apprehended, and the world had been reminded that sometimes the most unlikely witnesses are the ones who make all the difference. And for Ellie and Coda, it was just the beginning of a bond forged in courage, memory, and the extraordinary experience of uncovering hidden truths. The courthouse had a new energy the morning after the man in the red jacket was taken into custody. It wasn't the usual calm of bureaucratic proceedings, nor the quiet tension of a trial about to unfold. This was different. There was a sense of awe and respect in the air, a recognition that something extraordinary had occurred, a case solved not through conventional investigation alone, but through courage, memory, and an uncanny instinct that defied logic. Margaret Monroe clutched Ellie's hand tightly as they entered the courtroom once again. The toddler walked slowly, her small figure dwarfed by the towering wooden benches and high ceilings, yet there was no hesitation in her step. Beside her, Coda strode with confidence, his head held high, tail wagging slightly, though his eyes remained vigilant. The dog had been both protector and guide, and the bond between him and Ellie had grown unbreakable. Judge Whittaker took her seat, her expression calm yet infused with warmth. The gavel's echo was soft but commanding. "Court is now in session," she announced, her voice carrying through the room. The gallery was packed, reporters, family members, and law enforcement alike, all present to witness the final chapter in what had become one of the most talked-about stories in Cedar Ridge history. Officer Reyes and Detective Sergeant Harlan stood nearby, evidence folders in hand. The metallic object recovered from the red-jacketed man rested on the evidence table, a tangible reminder of the events that had nearly gone unresolved. The courtroom was tense, yet the atmosphere had shifted from fear to anticipation. Everyone knew the truth was finally about to be fully revealed, and justice would be served. Judge Whittaker addressed the courtroom. "Before we proceed, I would like to acknowledge the bravery of Miss Ellie Monroe and the exceptional instincts of Coda. Their actions have not only reopened a previously unsolved case, but have led directly to the apprehension of the responsible party. This court recognizes that justice was achieved through extraordinary circumstances." Ellie's small eyes widened as murmurs of approval and whispers of admiration rippled through the room. Margaret whispered softly, "You did it, Ellie. You helped us get justice for Daddy." Ellie leaned down to stroke Coda's head. "We did it together," she said. The dog's amber eyes met hers, intelligent and calm, as if acknowledging her words. The man in the red jacket was brought in, his hands cuffed, face pale and strained. He was visibly shaken, every detail of his guilt etched across his features. For months, he had thought the accident would remain an unsolved tragedy. He hadn't counted on a child who remembered and a dog who saw and protected. Judge Whittaker addressed him firmly. "Sir, you have been apprehended for actions that directly led to the death of Mr. Monroe. Do you understand that your actions will be fully adjudicated under the law?" The man's voice was barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." The prosecution stood, their tone measured yet resolute. "Your Honor, the child witness, Miss Ellie Monroe, has provided direct and corroborated testimony regarding the events leading to Mr. Monroe's death. The recovered evidence, the footprints, the fibers, and the metallic object all confirm the sequence described by the child and observed by Officer Coda. This combination leaves no doubt regarding the defendant's presence and actions that night." The courtroom leaned in, hanging on every word. Journalists scribbled feverishly, capturing every moment for what would soon become viral news. The story of a toddler and a police dog had captivated an entire town and was about to captivate the nation. Margaret whispered to Ellie, "Remember, honey, just tell the truth. You're so brave." Ellie nodded, small hands clutching Coda's fur. "Coda helped me remember," she said softly. The judge turned to Ellie. "Would you like to share with the court what you witnessed?" Ellie took a deep breath. He yelled at Daddy and then he pushed him. He picked up something shiny. Coda barked and tried to stop him, but Daddy fell. He ran, but Coda remembered, and now he's caught. A hush fell over the courtroom. The words, simple yet precise, carried the weight of truth. They were proof that justice could come from even the smallest witnesses, guided by instinct and courage. Officer Reyes stepped forward. "Your Honor, the suspect's confession yesterday aligns perfectly with the child's testimony. He admitted to yelling, grabbing the object, and leaving the scene. The combination of Ellie's recall and Coda's instincts made it possible to apprehend him safely before any further harm could occur. Detective Harlan added, "The forensic evidence, including the red jacket fibers, footprints, and the recovered metallic object, corroborates both the child's memory and Coda's actions. The investigation confirms the sequence of events as Ellie described." The man in the red jacket lowered his head, shame and fear visible on his face. "I didn't think anyone would know. I didn't know a child or a dog could stop me." Judge Whitaker's voice was stern yet measured. "Sir, your actions caused loss and trauma. The court recognizes that the extraordinary actions of a child and a police dog prevented further harm and revealed the truth. Your sentencing will reflect the gravity of your actions, but let this be a reminder that justice cannot be avoided, regardless of time or circumstance." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She hugged Ellie tightly, whispering, "You were amazing, honey, so brave." Ellie stroked Coda's fur gently. "We remembered," she said. "We stopped him." Outside, reporters and cameras swarmed the courthouse. Social media buzzed with clips of Ellie pointing at Coda in the courtroom, the child's testimony and Coda's intense, unwavering focus during the arrest. The story went viral within hours. Toddler and police dog solve months-old case, capturing hearts nationwide. Judge Whitaker made a final note for the court record. "Today, we have witnessed courage, memory, and instinct beyond expectation. This case reminds us that truth can emerge in ways no one anticipates, and that justice is not always found through conventional means alone." As the courtroom emptied, Ellie walked down the steps with Margaret and Coda. People stopped to watch, whispering, taking photos, and occasionally applauding. The toddler waved shyly, and Coda walked at her side, vigilant yet proud. Officer Reyes caught up with them. "Ellie, Coda, you both did something incredible. You helped bring closure and justice. The city will remember this day." Ellie looked up at him, eyes wide. "Coda helped me, and we remembered together." Reyes smiled. "Yes, together you both saved the day." Back in the secure room that had been their refuge, Margaret helped Ellie hang a small drawing she had made of Coda and herself in the courtroom. "This will remind you of your courage," she said. Ellie smiled, and Coda too. He remembered everything. Coda rested his head on Ellie's lap, ears twitching at every sound, alert as ever. But there was a calmness now, a quiet satisfaction. He had fulfilled his duty, guided by instinct, loyalty, and intelligence. The man in the red jacket was led to a waiting vehicle, escorted under heavy guard. His fate was sealed, the truth fully revealed. The town of Cedar Ridge would never forget the unusual pair who had solved the mystery, the child and the dog who saw what no one else could. In the following days, social media exploded with praise, news stories, and viral videos. The story was covered nationally, from morning shows to evening news. Everyone marveled at the courage of a toddler and the instincts of a police dog. Hashtags trended: toddler detective, Coda the hero, justice served by courage. But for Margaret and Ellie, the attention was secondary. What mattered most was the bond that had grown through adversity. They had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty together, and survived. Ellie leaned against Coda one last time, whispering softly, "We did it, Daddy's safe now." Coda's tail wagged slowly, eyes softening as if acknowledging the truth of her words. They had remembered, they had acted, and they had triumphed together. Judge Whitaker's words echoed in their minds. Justice can come from the most unexpected places. Courage is not measured by age or size, and the truth will always find a way to emerge, sometimes from the most unlikely heroes. As the sun set over Cedar Ridge, the courthouse steps empty and quiet, Ellie held Coda's paw. The world had witnessed an extraordinary story, a story of bravery, memory, and the unbreakable bond between a child and a dog. A story that reminded everyone that even the smallest witnesses can make the biggest difference. And as the shadows lengthened, one thing was certain. Wherever Ellie and Coda went next, they would face the world together, ready for whatever challenges and mysteries might come their way. The end.